This is how to sew in your ends when you're all done a project. So I've got just this very small sample here, but you can see I've got my initial cast on tail. So this is from the long tail when I very first started it, so that's my starting edge. And then this is the tail left from when I bound off. So that's the last tail that we pulled through that last stitch to finish it off. So sewing in your ends really is just securing the ends so that you know that it's not going to unravel on you. And just doing that in a way that sort of hides the tail so that you're not kind of making a mess of your hard work, your beautiful knitted work. So doesn't matter which one you start with, but we'll just pick one. So I'm going to go ahead with our cast on tail, but again, it doesn't matter. So we're going to use our yarn needle, which has just sort of like a really, really big needle. It has a really large eye so that we can get our yarn through it. And usually they're dull on the end. Sometimes they can be sharper, but it's actually helpful if they're dull so that we don't split the yarn as we try to go into some of the stitches. So we're going to take that yarn needle. I'm going to thread my yarn onto it, hopefully. Okay. And there we go. So it's good to have kind of at least a 6-inch tail. You want something to work with so that you're not struggling to get into the stitches because it's too short. So let's see what we'll do. I think with this garter stitch, what we're going to try to do is follow along with sort of the looping pattern of it, and that should hide our stitch pretty well, or our thread yarn pretty well. So from here, I'm just going to follow the stitch pattern. So I'm going to follow this first loop here. I'm going to go into the next one. There are lots of different ways of doing this, depending on the stitch pattern as well. And then let's go back into that next one. So you're just guiding the yarn through some of the stitches, again, so that it can't unravel, and so that it looks nice and neat to finish off. So far, you can't really see where my extra yarn is. It might look a little bit thicker along that edge, but it's pretty good. It hasn't changed the shape of any of the stitches. Not too bad. So we'll try a couple more. Sometimes I like to even loop back in a bit of a circle just to know that it's really not going to be able to pull out. So we'll go just one more time here. Okay, so we'll call that good there. And then now all I'm going to do, so also if you know that you have a front and a back, you're going to want to finish on the back here. So we'll just pretend that this is, if your front and back look the same, you can just pick one. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead and take my needle off. I'm going to cut the yarn that's left pretty close to the knitting. So just a little tail left there. So this we can just get rid of now. And then you can see we've just got a little tail left, and that will just sort of pull back into the knitting. And then you can see that end has been taken care of, and it's really hard to notice where I even sewed that back in. So we're all secure, looks pretty neat, not too bad. And then we're just going to do the same thing with our bind off tail. Okay, so we've got the yarn threaded onto the needle again, and then same thing. At this end here, I've got a bit of a kind of a loose looking stitch, so sometimes when I sew in my ends, I'll try to tighten that up a little bit, just sort of fix up any bits that look a little bit uneven. So I'm going to go in there. We'll just see if we can snug it up a little bit, and then same thing as we did at the other end. We'll just follow one of the strands of yarn as best we can here. So just going in and out. And again, if you've sort of chosen one side to be the front and the back, then you're going to want to do this on the back side. Okay, so I've kind of gone down that little row there, again pretty well hidden, and I'm just going to loop back and go in a little bit of a circle just to make sure it's really secure in there. So I'm into the second row here, and we'll call this good. Okay, so we'll take the yarn needle off again, done with that. And again, so I've taken that yarn through probably 6 or 7 stitches or something, and it's really hard to see where I did that. So again, we're just going to cut the last little bit off. And we've got just that last tiny little tail there, but pretty hard to see. If we look at what's now going to be the front of our work, even though it doesn't really matter, no sign of that sewing in of the ends there at all. So it's pretty well hidden. So there you go, that's sewing in your ends. So your hopefully bigger than this project is all finished.